When rancher Anthony Ridley woke up one March morning, he found his cattle fenced in. Not by storms or barbed wire, but by a brand new gate locked by the homeowners association. Most neighbors thought he'd give in. Instead, he made one move that flipped the entire fight, and the HOA never saw it coming. Anthony Ridley thought he'd left his battles behind in Amarillo. Just 6 weeks into life on his new ranch outside Abilene, he stepped onto his porch one March morning with a mug of coffee and froze. A brand new steel fence stretched across his property line. At its center, a heavy padlock glinted in the sunlight. A sign read, "Property access managed by Lakeside Meadows HOA." His cattle were inside, but penned like zoo animals. The only road out, his access to the county highway, was on the other side of that lock. And the key belonged to HOA President Marjorie Kane. Sharp suits, sharper heels, and a reputation for breaking anyone who didn't bend. When Anthony confronted the workers finishing the installation, they only muttered, "Talk to the board." Then Marjorie herself stepped out of her spotless SUV, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Ridley," she said coldly, "your fence doesn't meet community standards. Until it's corrected, this gate stays locked." Anthony stared at her. "That's my access road. My cattle need the creek on the other side." Marjorie's smile was razor thin. "Rules are rules. Until you comply, you're locked in." The gate clanged shut. His land, his dream, had been hijacked overnight. At the next HOA meeting, Anthony sat in the crowded clubhouse, listening to arguments about mailbox colors and lawn ornaments until his name was called. Marjorie, at the center of the board table, didn't waste time. "Mr. Ridley, let's discuss your non-compliant fence." Anthony opened a folder of photos and documents. "This fence keeps my cattle safe. It's practical. That's what matters." "Practical isn't the standard," Marjorie replied. "Uniformity is." Anthony glanced around the room. "I drove past 3 homes with mismatched fences. None of them are padlocked. Why me?" The room shifted uncomfortably. Marjorie's tone sharpened. "Those cases are under review. Until yours is fixed, fines will continue." "And blocking my cattle from water?" Anthony pressed. "That's dangerous." "You have alternatives," she said flatly. By the end of the meeting, it was clear this wasn't about rules, it was about control. Each day, Anthony's mailbox filled with fresh HOA notices. Fines rose from $50 a day to $100. One letter even called his backup water tanks a safety hazard. Glenn Porter, his neighbor and friend, shook his head over coffee. "They'll bleed you dry until you fold." Anthony refused. He requested mediation, hoping for reason. Instead, Marjorie offered the same demand: replace the fence or stay locked in. He walked out, knowing compromise wasn't coming. When Anthony found the creek completely cut off by the new fencing, panic set in. His cattle clustered at the barrier, bellowing for water. He hauled tanks back and forth himself, exhausted and angry. "You want dead cattle on your conscience?" He snapped over the phone to the HOA office. The receptionist only repeated, "We confirmed other water sources on your property." When he confronted Marjorie at her pristine home, her answer was the same rehearsed line. "The rules are the rules." Neighbors watched from behind curtains. The fight had become a spectacle. Then one morning, a for sale sign appeared on the small half-acre lot where the locked gate stood. Anthony stared at it, gears turning. If he owned that strip, he owned the gate. And if he owned the gate, the lock would be his. But he knew if Marjorie found out, she'd block the deal. So he went to attorney Tom Baird, who confirmed the plan was legal, as long as Anthony stayed invisible in the purchase. Through a trusted friend, Brett Lawson, Anthony quietly set up an LLC to buy the land. The offer was accepted. The HOA had no idea. Weeks later, Anthony stood at the gate, a new key in his hand. The padlock clicked open. The sound was sharp, final. He swung the gate wide and watched his cattle move freely toward the creek. For the first time in months, control was his. But Marjorie didn't stay away for long. Days later, she arrived with board members and deputies in tow. Anthony handed over his deed. The deputy nodded. "He owns it." Marjorie's jaw clenched. "We'll see you in court." The battle was far from over. The HOA fired back with letters, threats, and finally a lawsuit claiming his purchase was invalid. At the same time, they tried to push new amendments, giving themselves sweeping power over all access points. Neighbors were divided. Some whispered support. Others feared retaliation. Social media lit up. Local papers ran headlines. "Rancher battles HOA over locked gate." At a community barbecue, Marjorie confronted him. "You'd be wise to think about the long-term consequences." Anthony shot back, loud enough for nearby neighbors to hear. "You chose the lock. Now live with it." The tide began to turn. People were no longer afraid to question her. In county court, Marjorie arrived polished and confident. Anthony arrived steady, armed with documents and resolve. The hearings drew curious crowds. Neighbors saw the fight wasn't just about a fence, it was about whether one board could bully everyone. On a bright summer morning, the judge delivered the ruling. Anthony's purchase was valid, the HOA had no claim, and they were ordered to pay his legal fees. Anthony finally exhaled. Glenn grinned. Paula whispered, "You've already changed this place." Outside, reporters swarmed. Anthony kept it simple. This was never about a fence. It was about standing your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. Back at the ranch, Anthony leaned against the post by his open gate, cattle grazing near the creek. The breeze felt lighter than it had in months. Glenn handed him a cold beer. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Anthony nodded. "Better than good, because if you stand up once, maybe others will too." And over the weeks that followed, the change was real. HOA meetings grew quieter, board members more cautious. Neighbors spoke up without looking over their shoulders. Fear had cracked, and that was the real victory.